Before you decide on the content to cover in your course, endow your course with a strong internal structure conducive to student learning. Alignment among three main course components ensures an internally consistent structure. Alignment is when the objectives articulate the knowledge and skills you want students to acquire by the end of the course. Assessments allow the instructor to check the degree to which the students are meeting the learning objectives. Instructional strategies are chosen to foster student learning towards meeting the objectives. When these components are not aligned, students might rightfully complain that the test did not have anything to do with what was covered in class. Or instructors might feel that even though students are earning a passing grade, they haven't really mastered the material at the desired level. Aligning these three components is a dynamic process, since a change in one necessarily affects the other two. One way to approach course design is to start from the learning objectives, then move on to the other two components, and revisit the cycle iteratively as needed. Articulating your learning objectives will help you select and organize course content and determine appropriate assessments and instructional strategies. Students direct their learning efforts appropriately and monitor their own progress. Firstly, you have to answer these questions. What has been learned? What needs to be achieved? What will be studied? From there, we can outline what is expected to be achieved as a result of instruction. However, as instructors, we often have a good idea of what we want to accomplish in a given course, such as, we want to cover certain topics, or we want to teach students certain ideas and skills. We should also think in terms of what we want the students to be able to do at the end of the course. It is very helpful to articulate learning objectives by completing this prompt. At the end of the course, students should be able to. Learning objectives should be student-centered. The objective should focus on what the students will learn and be able to do, rather than what the teacher will cover in the course. This approach puts the learners at the heart of the educational process. Teachers should use action verbs in Bloom taxonomy. For examples, instead of using remember, teachers should use action verbs, such as define, describe, identify, label, list, match, name, outline, recall, recognize, reproduce, select, state, locate. Instead of using understand, teachers should use action verbs, such as illustrate, defend, compare, distinguish, estimate, explain, classify, generalize, interpret, paraphrase, predict, rewrite, summarize, translate. Instead of using apply, teachers should use action verbs, such as implement, organize, dramatize, solve, construct, demonstrate, discover, manipulate, modify, operate, predict, prepare, produce, relate, show, solve, choose. Instead of using analyze, teachers should use action verbs, such as analyze, break down, compare, select, contrast, deconstruct, discriminate, distinguish, identify, outline. Instead of using evaluate, teachers should use action verbs, such as rank, assess, monitor, check, test, judge. Instead of using create, teachers should use action verbs, such as generate, plan, compose, develop, create, invent, organize, construct, produce, compile, design, devise. In general, learning objectives should be expressed according to SMART principles. S stands for specific. The objective should be broken down into manageable components, providing a clear and concise description of the intended outcomes. Many activities that faculty believe require a single skill, for example, writing or problem solving, actually involve a synthesis of many component skills. To master these complex skills, students must practice and gain proficiency in the discrete component. Skills. Writing may involve identifying an argument, enlisting appropriate evidence, organizing paragraphs, etc. Problem solving may require defining the parameters of the problem, choosing appropriate formulas, etc. Breaking down the skills will allow us to select appropriate assessments and instructional strategies so that students practice all component skills. For example, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to identify and name shapes with 90% accuracy. This objective is clear, measurable, and achievable for elementary students. It uses the action verb identify, which is appropriate for the cognitive process involved. However, it could be improved by specifying the types of shapes to be learned, providing a more precise learning path. M stands for measurable. The objective should include guidelines for evaluation, allowing teachers to assess how well students have achieved the desired learning outcomes, so that they cannot be vague. This often involves using external indicators, such as what the student does or says, as a measure of progress. Some learning objectives that are typically vague but are often used include: understand X, obtain a working knowledge of X, gain an appreciation for X. These objectives can be clarified by asking ourselves, what would students do differently if they really understand or appreciate X? A stands for achievable. The objective should be realistic given the available resources, time, and students' background and readiness to learn. It should also align with the cognitive skill levels of the students or the course level. R stands for result-oriented. The objective should focus on the outcomes, i.e., the skills, knowledge, or attitudes that students should have acquired by the end of the class/unit/session. This shifts the focus from the educational activities or processes to the end result. T stands for time-bound. If applicable, the objective should include a clear timeline, providing a time frame within which students are expected to achieve competence.